Hello and welcome to this CresFest world. That incredible funky playing you heard just now is from the Haas sisters from the USA, who were international guests at CresFest in 2023. My name's Neil Adam and I'm your host. CresFest is a music festival which takes place every year in April in Creswick, a small country town in rural Victoria near Ballarat, maybe 90 minutes out of Melbourne. Organising a music festival in a small country town puts you in touch with all kinds of interesting people. Some are local, some are not. Some are musicians, some are not. Some of the chat is about music, and guess what? Some is not. Today I'm going to be talking with GINA Williams. She and her partner Guy Ghouse will be amongst the performers topping the bill at CresFest 24 in a few weeks. GINA has been writing songs in the indigenous language of her ancestors, the Noongar people of Western Australia, for many years. Today I'm going to ask her about that and about her new opera, Wundig Wer Wilura, based on a traditional Romeo and Juliet-like story learnt from her uncle, which has just finished its premiere run in Perth to the most rave reviews, which you can find online. I'm going to ask her also about her views on the no vote across the country, to the Indigenous voice to Parliament and what effect it's having on her work preserving the language and culture of her Noongar people. GINA is always great to talk to. Make sure you stay tuned.
We just literally finished the season of our second opera, Wundig Wer Wilura, which is a love story from Balladong country, which is just east of Perth in a town called York. York is the first inland settlement in Western Australia, and it's firmly in the heart of Noongar country. And I'm a Balladong person, so it's my particular part of the Noongar nation geographically. As I said, it's a love story. There's two hills in York, Mount Brown and Mount Bakewell, and this is the story of these two lovers who were a bit naughty. They broke law and to be together, and they ended up banished into the two hills, into the mountains, never to meet until the mountains crumble. So it's a beautiful story. It's a full-length opera entirely in language. There is no English at all, and it's the second one of its kind. The first one was the first opera that Guy and I wrote, called Wundig Wer Wilura, which is the story of Magpie and Crow, and that's it was a lovely children's work, but this one was a fully blown, sung through, grown up opera. So it was wonderful.
What an amazing thing to take on. Where did you get the story from?
The story is 3,000 generations old. It's been passed down from generation to generation through the family. I'm descendant of this story, and so it was passed on to me when I was I think I would have been about 20 years old, and my uncle took me on top of Mount Brown, Wongborough, which is the sleeping woman, and we looked over at Walwelling, which is called the Place of Tears, and he said, "My girl, I want to tell you about a love story that is of the ages." So people compare it to Romeo and Juliet because I guess they need something to pin it to, but this story predates all of that. And it's a tale of as old as time. It's a beautiful love story. It's a tragedy, a real tragedy, because they don't just die, but the families die as well. It's and it's a real cautionary tale as well. But more than that, it's about love of country, love of each other, love of family, and the lengths that we go to make sure that country and families are kept safe. So, yeah, it's a pretty big story.
That's a monumental series of themes there. My goodness, that would... if we paid attention to all of those things properly, the whole of the planet would put right, would it not?
I agree. I actually think that these stories, this old knowledge, is something that is, it's now more important than ever to focus on these things. Our heads have been turned towards economy over community, and I think that our planet is groaning under the weight of our willful ignorance of the things that really matter. You can't eat money, and unless, I don't know, I don't know what the answers are, but I do think that it's time for us to start turning back to older things.
And I feel really privileged, very lucky to be able to speak to you, an Indigenous person. You've got the result, you've got the answers to some of those very difficult questions which face us all, sitting there in your family heritage, and here you are with the opera, bringing some of it out for Indigenous and Western audiences. What a lovely, fantastic thing to do.
Yeah, Neil, I know you're an ally, and so what Guy and I do is never about what separates us. It's never about the things that make us different. It's always about us coming together. At some point, your ancestors and my ancestors sat around the same campfire. At some point, we've broken bread together, and I think we're in a day and age where we just need to find our way back, and some of us are a little bit closer to it than others. And that's not to say that we have all the answers. I'd never presume to think that I know the answers to things. In fact, I'm not sure what the answer is, because we are so far gone. But I do think that collectively, when we share, we become better at learning about each other and about learning about the ways forward. And not just as Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people, but just as human beings together. I think that's the key, is that we stop focusing on, on our mobs, and we actually start focusing on the collective and going, what's best for everybody. And that doesn't suit everybody, obviously. There's a percentage in this world that is motivated by money and is motivated by a thriving economy. And I know that we've all got to eat, but I think that there are better ways that we can make sure that we're all looked after.
I could easily ask you questions at this stage in the conversation about the no vote to Parliament, but I don't know.
I think I want to live in a yes world, and it doesn't matter to me what the public voted.
Yeah.
That conversation is done. For me, it hasn't changed how I view my place in this world. I'm still about love, and I'm still about healing. And one day, I think that government will catch up. One day, maybe a descendant of Peter Dutton or Jacinta Price will go, actually, do you know what? They were wrong. They got this wrong. They were mean-spirited. And I want to be part of that change. I want to be part of that shift. Guy and I, we do a lot of schools incursions. We do up to 100 schools incursions a year. So that's a really big part of what we do. We see up to 3,000 children in any given week. So that's a big footprint that we've got just here on Noongar country. And I see these kids. That's the future. This is where it's at for us. It's politicians, the people that voted no, and it was not a huge landslide. 5.5 million eligible voters still decided to say yes. And that's a really big political base. I actually think that I feel really positive about all of that, because I think that change is coming, and government just need to step out of the way. They need to stop trying to politicise things that simply come down to us being good human beings.
You come to CresFest, it's you and Guy, and there won't be a symphony orchestra there. As far as I understand it.
Just in our head.
So will you be able to do some of the songs from the opera in your...
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So the beauty about what Guy and I do is that everything works with a guitar and a voice.
I'll just say, not any old guitar either. Guy Ghouse, for those potential CresFest visitors who haven't seen him play, is an outstanding player, and the two of you create this musical entity, which is really fantastic to see.
Thank you. He's extraordinary. He is extraordinarily gifted. He's the most humble, unassuming person in the room. And he would tell you that everything he wants to say, he says with his guitar, with his instrument. And I believe that's true. The music that we write is the completion. That's the completion. Everything else, all the bells and whistles, the symphonies, the bands, the other incarnations of what we do, they are in addition to. So ultimately, everything has to stack up with storytelling, and it has to stack up with just he and I being able to play and sing. And the language has to be front and center of it. So it's really actually not even about us. It's entirely about presenting a very rare language that I think is incredibly beautiful, in a way that brings dignity and integrity, and it is delivered with great love to audiences. So it's never us performing for audiences, it is us sharing with our friends. And that's, you know, whether it's a house concert or whether it's in stadiums when we're playing, you know, grand final gigs or whatever, it's always the same passion and the same intent.
That's fantastic. I'm no great expert on the role of music in keeping languages alive, but I do know that the rebirth, really, of Scots Gaelic singing in Scotland and the greater interest in Scots Gaelic singing and the language is absolutely reinforced in schools by people who have the language and are able to sing in the traditional manner. And I had this fantastic conversation about a couple of weeks ago with Melisande, who's a French-Canadian singer who's bringing her band here this time. And she and her husband are on a two-person, and they're not alone in this, mission to keep French language alive in French-speaking Canada and flourishing. And they go out and collect folk songs and, you know, put beats behind them and turn them into something that sounds very poppy. But there's a kind of parallel with what you're doing there, using the music to keep the language alive.
Yes, we have the Noongar Nation is one of the largest Aboriginal nations. There's 40,000 of us, and we occupy land mass. Noongar country is about the same size as Spain, so we're very big. Less than 1%, less than 400 people speak Noongar language. And when you consider that Noongar country is in the heart of our capital city in West Australia, Perth is in Borloo, is in Noongar country. So 2.5 million people. We could have 1 million speakers, but we don't, because the accessibility of it. So for us, music is a way of making it accessible, and also, you know, you don't have to agree with my politic to buy a ticket to my show. You know, plenty of people are, you know, quite right-winged, and yet they would happily sit through a Midnight Oil concert, you know, all that sort of lefty stuff. And I think that music has a way of navigating us and giving us opportunities to speak when words fail us. And for Noongar language to be heard in this way, because, you know, we do workshops and things, and people immediately come to us and go, oh, I'm not a great singer and I'm not good with language. And I go, yeah, okay, then, so let's just have some fun then. And so it's entirely about making this something that is positive, that, you know, your heart, your brain doesn't have to understand what's happening, but your heart knows that there's something good going on.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the first step. What we know is that babies sing before they speak. They dance before they walk. So, you know, the arts are within us from conception. So from the moment of we draw our first breath, we're making noise and we're trying to communicate. And I think that music is a great way of bringing that in. And, you know, I saw it recently in a movie. I can't think what the movie was, but it was, if you're not brave enough to say it and sing it. And I think that's, you know, where I've found my voice, where I ordinarily wouldn't speak up about things, but I'm entirely comfortable about speaking to the songs that we write and explaining to you what's important through this language.
Can I ask you a little bit about how you come to speak the language?
Yeah, sure. So I didn't grow up with my language.
Yeah.
I was adopted and fostered and all those things. And I went back and I found my family and I learned about where I came from and reconnected. And for me, you know, I was working as a journalist many, many years ago, and there was a Noongar language conference and all the speakers sort of congregated in this space. There was only a handful of them. And, you know, it was a 3-day conference. And I remember listening to these uncles standing around the fire that night, and they were talking, and my uncle turned around to me and he goes, you know, my girl, I reckon we've got 10 years. If we can't lock down some of this language in 10 years, it will be gone forever. And that, it broke my heart. I stood there in front of the fire under a billion stars on home country, and I just thought, I felt so powerless in this. I felt like we'd been robbed by degrees, you know, and it was way back then. This is the early 90s, and I thought if there was something that I could do to stop it, to turn this around, then that's what I would do. And so, you know, many years later, I was in New Zealand of all places, and this lady was giving me a massage, and she goes, oh, and I've just released an album, Brilliant Blue, entirely in English. And she said, I feel like I need to give you a message. I don't want to freak you out. Trust me, I was freaked out. And she said, she goes, oh, I know that you've just released this album in English, but I think the next album that you do will be in your ancestors' tongue. And I had a little chuckle, and she goes, what? And because years had gone since I'd had this encounter with my uncle at this meeting. And I had a little laugh, and she goes, what? And I said, oh, I think my language is close to extinct now. And she goes, that's so sad. She goes, but I've really got this strong feeling. Anyway, 10 years later, Guy and I released Kalyakul, our first album, and it was entirely in Noongar language. And there was a TAFE course that I went to. They were saying, learn Noongar language. And I thought, right, I'm signing up for that. So I did. And I went to the lessons, and my teacher, I was the only Noongar in the class. My teacher looked at me and she was like, why are you here? And I was like, shame job. I should have turned left and gone to Feng Shui, but I turned right. Now I'm here in Noongar lessons. And how embarrassing. I'm the only Noongar in the class. I had to come to a classroom to learn what should have been my birthright. And I went on and on and on, and she just kind of sat there with this smirk on her face waiting for me to draw breath. And and then this lady that was sitting next to me, she goes, you know, that's not your shame, that's ours. And it cracked something open in my heart, and I realised that, you know, this isn't about me. It's actually about securing something for all of us, because we all call this place home. And, you know, what's been really beautiful about this journey is that once a bunch of elders and language speakers found out that this was my heart, that this is what I wanted to do, everyone sort of started rallying around us. And so I've never felt alone on this. My language skills kind of went through the roof. I realized that I was a fluent language speaker when I started dreaming in language.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and Guy and I, we've been able to share what we've learned with other people trying to rescue their languages. We wrote a little welcome song called Wundig, which is shared, you know, around the world. There's all these different, and it keeps, every so often I get a little clip sent to me. You know, I don't know if you know Mel Webb, but he took a video of him with a whole bunch of people up in a chalet on an Alp in Switzerland singing Wundig in French. You know, there's a Walpri version. There's, I think it's, there's the language that's down in Port Fairy that way. There's a version of Wundig down there. There's, you know, there's a language version of Wundig in the Midwest of WA where there's only 3 speakers left of the language. And I just think when these languages, they fade away, there will still be remnants of it, and it won't be, what we do isn't in vain. And it's also part of a greater love revolution. Love's the new radical in my head, and I want to lead that. I want to be one of the leaders in that charge. There's enough negativity, there's enough darkness, and there's enough mean-spiritedness. And, you know, the folk and music community in Australia particularly, I have found my mob. You know, you guys have embraced us and you've encouraged us and you've given us platforms where we otherwise wouldn't be heard. And that's a powerful thing. Country towns are mine and Guy's happy place. So we've both lived regionally throughout our lives. My first experience of live music happened in a CWA hall when I was about 4 years old. Yeah. And this woman came and sang, and, you know, the place where we were staying had a population of 70. You know, there was no general store, there was no petrol station, you know, there's nothing except this little CWA hall in the middle of this farming community. And people came from everywhere and they brought food and we shared food, and the CWA baked goodies were amazing. But this, you know, and then this woman sang, and I'd never heard someone sing live before, and it was the most stunning, extraordinary thing. And, you know, I've always held that in my heart. And I think, you know, again, this focus on communities, it's great when musicians come to town, but I love the impact of how communities are formed. And, you know, we take away memories and things, but actually what it does is it strengthens where you live in the longer term. It builds your economy, and it brings tourism dollars into your towns. And I think that stuff is, you know, it's really, really important. And so we love all of that stuff. So
that's exactly true about Creswick. You're going to see when you get here, there'll be streets full of all kinds of activities and all these lovely gold era venues. The town hall is a particularly good example of that. You stand on the stage in the town hall, and you actually have a square space in front of you, not a great big rectangular space where the back of the hall is 100 meters away. Not like some of the big festivals where we have to have great big screens to enable, you know, performers to be seen from by the people at the back of the tent. But you know, you're going to be able to see the faces of the people in the back row, and they'll be able to see you. And it's just a lovely thing, a 200-seater hall. And the vibe in there is always absolutely perfect. It'll be marvellous to see the two of you playing there.
I can't wait. That actually does really sound like my happy place. The other thing is you know, off stage, I love meeting people. 35 sleeps. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm counting down too. Well, that was the great GINA Williams. I always found her an inspirational and highly interesting person to talk to. It was great to hear about the new opera. What a fantastic thing to undertake, and with such success. Have a look at Limelight magazine, limelight-arts.com.au for the review. And it was also great to hear her take on the no vote. I personally found that a very depressing time. I don't mind sharing that with you. And it was great to have Gina's take on the whole thing, which is basically, let's take the long view, let's not get too tied up in the political shenanigans which led to the no vote at the end of last year. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and rate it. That always helps spread the word. I don't know if you've heard, but we're now in the top 10 performing arts podcasts in Australia on Apple Podcasts. As the old BBC presenter John Hibden used to say, if you have been, thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye-bye.